Okay, Browns defensive coordinator. We want to get right into this. On one hand, this looks like it would be a very attractive job. You've got, I would say, I don't know if I want to call them premier players. I know you got one premier player, and I think you have two edge premier players. Miles, premier. Denzel and Emerson in the back. I don't know. Who are they? What are they? They've been great at times this year. They've been all-time inexplicably, what the hell are you doing at times this year? But there are pieces here.
Yeah.
There's also two other defensive coordinator jobs open right now. There will likely be between 6 and 8 when all this shakes out. The head coaching jobs that are open now, many of them will likely bring in their own defensive coordinators. So there's going to be other jobs open down the road. How attractive is this job? Jason, you can start.
From a player talent standpoint, I think it's very attractive. The organization is what's going to hold them back, and just the volatility and the dysfunction and they never get it right. And I really think that, and we saw a report out of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette today or yesterday that Flores is in no hurry. He'll interview with the Browns today, but he's in no hurry to make a decision. He thinks he's got other options.
Nor should he be.
And yeah, he wants to see what else is out there. You just alluded to it. Carolina, Atlanta, and Cleveland are open right now. Arizona could come open. Denver could come open. These are places that don't have a head coach.
And for context, historically, when there is a change at head coach, there's almost always changes at the coordinator positions too. So the Arizona job will likely come open.
Indy. There's the other ones there too. Houston.
Yeah, those jobs are most likely going to come up. And then you have in San Francisco, you've got other defensive coordinators that are perhaps going to fill head coaching jobs.
Yeah.
So in all, it could be 10, and that's not uncommon. About a third of these jobs tend to flush and rotate every year.
And it's very, very early in the process. And a guy like D'Amico Ryans, really, he can interview, but will they make a decision before the Niners are eliminated? So this could go on for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Right.
And we're saying Brian Flores, if he really wants to stretch this out, and maybe Jim Schwartz feels the same way. Maybe Schwartz stretches this out too and sees what else is out there.
Yeah, it's not like this job is so attractive that someone is going to say, "Oh, I got to take it. I better jump at this one."
Right.
And to your point, I think it's the dysfunction in the ownership and the history that is 1,000% working against us landing a candidate early. Bull?
I think there's a few things at play here. When you look at Brian Flores, it's very interesting because I think quite often, we've talked about the problem of there not being enough black head coaches in the NFL, and I think part of the reason for that, beyond the obvious, is that often I believe that black coaches have felt this pressure to take any job they could get because they're not getting as many opportunities as white coaches.
Right.
Right? Now, I don't know if that's the case at defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator. I think it's less the case.
It may certainly be the case with head coach.
It's certainly with head coach. So I thought about that, but and then I was like, well, but Brian Flores, I think as a DC does have a lot of options. I agree with Jason in terms of the talent. The Browns are a good choice. Organizationally, it's not a good choice. However, some of these other franchises we're talking about are also pretty bad organizations.
Arizona just extended Kingsbury and then fired him.
Arizona's a disaster. Indianapolis is a total mess. Atlanta's not known as a great organization. Houston, that situation's a mess. We don't. The GM how long is he going to be there?
You do have a lot of draft capital in Houston.
You have more draft capital in these other spots. I think another important thing for the coach, for the DC, how much power do I have, right?
Yeah.
In Cleveland,
full autonomy.
The defensive coach is basically the head coach of the defense.
Yeah.
Whereas
for better or worse, as we saw
right, for better or worse, for some of these other teams, he may not have as much power, especially if the head coach is a defensive guy. So I think, based on the 7 teams you showed, I actually think the Browns are on the upper tier of that.
You do.
That's how I look at it, but who knows what those.
G, you agree with that? Do you think they are in the upper tier?
I'll take it a step further. I've been down on the Browns for about since the beginning of the season. But I will say when we looked at this question, and I looked at it when I was at home, I come to the conclusion that the Browns are by far the top position on there. 3 reasons. You guys mentioned the autonomy. Yeah. He's going to get full reign of what he wants to do. Their Browns are under the microscope and knowing that they have to upgrade the defense. So he's going to get all the ingredients to make a great stew. He's going to get everything he got. All the ingredients is there for him. He's going to be there after Andrew Berry knows he has to win. So that's taken care of, and him and Stefanski will run two separate sides of the building. You also look at it this way. If you're running a good defense and you're running aggressive defense, one of the things that you always want to have is a quarterback, right? Because you don't want to feel like, oh, wow, I got Jacoby Brissett. We got to be a little conservative. We can't give up points too quick. If you got Deshaun Watson, do you feel he's going to be back out of all of those other positions?
Yeah, bring up that list of teams again, Mike, if you could.
Give us one sec.
Out of all these teams up here, the Browns have the best quarterback. Look, Indianapolis needs a quarterback. Carolina, Arizona, Kyler Murray's
Kyler's
out.
good, but he's not as good as Watson.
We know what's going on with Sierra's dude in Denver, Houston, and these guys have no quarterbacks. Cleveland has one. We can rock and roll with that. He can be aggressive because he ain't got to worry about not giving up points. Then the biggest thing is the ingredients you already have. If I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm looking at not only who you got that's a marquee name, who do I think on the roster that was playing out of position? Who on the roster didn't like the defensive coordinator and you just feel like you could come in and they'll be back to normal? You look at when he was in Miami, 2 elite corners. He has to look and say, I love Martin Emerson. I love that new guy. And he has to say, if I'm playing man coverage and I'm actually playing aggressive, Denzel Ward is my other guy. He guys Newsome. So you got a lot of good young pieces in the secondary that he feels he can coach up. And then obviously you have Myles Garrett up front, who by far is the best defensive player out of anybody on that list. To me, those three major issues
There are
make
gaping
Brown
holes, though.
There are.
I
do think a smart defensive coordinator and a creative defensive coordinator could do something with JOK as well. I know he had a bad year.
I forgot about him.
But
he'll love his.
You got to find a way to use that guy. He has a skill set. We haven't used it properly. I would say, looking at the teams again, I mean, Denver's defense was excellent this year.
Very good.
Very good. But their offense is such a mess. I know you could argue, well, what if Watson doesn't get it back together? Something we've talked about. That's possible. I think if you had to ask most people now, more likely to be good in 2023, Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson, I think almost everybody would say Deshaun Watson.
Let me ask you this. There was a prevalent thought in Denver beginning around November that maybe it wasn't Russ, maybe the head coach who was dysfunctional from game one. If you remember some of the key decisions he had to make in that week 1 game against Seattle, which was a huge game for Russ. You go back and you look at some of the things he did, you've almost forgotten how bad they were. Remember, he bled the clock so they could try a 64-yard field goal.
Yeah.
He mismanaged timeouts. It got to be so bad that early in the season he actually brought in and added a position on the coaching staff to help manage the game, the clock. So there was a thought really that took foothold in about November in Denver that it's not Russ, it's the head coach.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
I don't believe it. I mean, he's had 2 bad years. He was terrible in his last year in Seattle. And
he was better than he was last year.
But we chalked it up to injury, and it was just injury, and he'll be fine. And then he goes to Denver, and he's even worse.
Do you think he's done?
Yeah.
You do?
I do.
I do too.
Now, he could be better than what he was last year and still be done. Right?
If he plays next year like he did last year,
that's it.
they're going to eat that
They're
money.
screwed.
Yeah.
They have to eat that contract.
This is the life of a mobile quarterback. Usually when you can do both and you can mix and you can scramble and you can be elusive and you can extend plays, that's a cheat code, right?
Yeah.
That helps you not. So if you can't read defenses, you can always move around. If you get pressure, you can always scramble. But when you start to get older and you're no longer doing that, look at all the quarterbacks who had issues with that.
Yeah, you become a lot easier to defend.
Usually when your legs go, you go.
Cam Newton, how fast did he go off the cliff?
Cam Newton went with the first.
Well, you're kind of scaring me, though, because we've got one of those.
Yeah, see, I was just going to go there. Just going to go there.
G, what are you saying, man?
I don't think Watson's main attribute is his legs. He can run.
Although I would argue Russell's wasn't either. I mean,
No, but Russell was very good running the football.
I mean, a lot of guys, Josh Allen runs all the time. Aaron Rodgers
But
is
Bull,
run a
I
lot.
wonder, and we're seeing this with Lamar Jackson, we've seen this with other mobile quarterbacks.
Aaron Rodgers too. He fell off a cliff.
If you can move
You can't
and
put Rodgers in the
avoid
same category.
that first sack,
Yeah.
of course your numbers passing the ball are going to be better because you now have more time to complete a pass.
Right.
And that's a really interesting point that G makes, because who is the scrambling quarterback that had success past 33?
There aren't.
But if we're calling Russell Wilson a scrambling quarterback,
He was a quarterback who could scramble.
then I would call Aaron Rodgers a scrambling quarterback
Once upon a time, he
Once
was.
upon a time he was.
But he was good until this year.
He won MVP last year.
But
Yeah.
he is what all of those were not.
Yeah.
He was primarily a passing quarterback.
And he had the best arm
who
in the
could
league.
run.
So
but
was Wilson.
I think these
That's
other
how
guys
I look
are
at
quarterbacks.
Watson too, though.
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson is a running quarterback who can pass.
Yes.
I look at Watson and Russell Wilson and Rodgers
And
as
Mahomes.
passing quarterbacks who can run.
And in fairness to the 33, running quarterbacks have only been in the NFL the last
That's
few
true.
years.
Well,
They've
Frank
never-
Tarkenton ran.
They were, Randall Cunningham. He was. I don't know when he fell off or when he. But
Yeah.
he felt like
Dante
he was good.
Culpepper.
Past, but it's only been within the last 8 to 10 years that there's even a place in the NFL for these guys that we're
Yeah,
talking.
it's not
Russell Wilson
prevalent.
wouldn't have played quarterback in the NFL.
Well, I
in
don't
the
know.
80s.
I don't know that Steve Young was a very
was.
He
mobile
was.
quarterback.
He
Now,
was.
he left the game not because of.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
he
had to go
definitely
to the
became less
CFL to prove
elusive.
him, or the USFL to prove
He
himself.
did,
Yeah.
but he had the concussions and stepped away because of that. But the only
But
reason
Watson's also a lot younger too. I mean, he's
he'll be
27.
28 when the season starts.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys a question real quick based on this. What rushing total does a quarterback need to have to be considered a rushing quarterback?
I don't even look at rushing totals.
I don't either.
I think it's amount-
your eye test. Can he extend plays?
Yeah.
I get that. I'm just saying, so like for Watson, whether he's a quote-unquote rushing quarterback or a quarterback that can run, is there a threshold number-wise where it crosses from one
No,
to the
but
other?
when I watch Watson, he is a quarterback who can run. There's no question about that.
Yeah, but I don't think of him the same way I think of Lamar.
If you watch a game and you say, if somebody says, give me his number one attribute, and they say extend plays, that's a
But I
running
don't think that's
quarterback.
Deshaun Watson's
But yet
number
at the
one
same
attribute.
time, I would say that about Ben Roethlisberger, and he was not at all.
Well,
a
he was
running
the outlier
quarterback.
because he was an oak tree.
Yeah.
So you'd have 3 guys hanging on his leg.
To
and he
me,
could
it's
stop
do they call often design runs for the quarterback,
or
which they do for Lamar Jackson all the time, and they don't really do that on any kind of regular basis for the other guys.
how many reads do you get to in your progression before you say I'm out?
That's fair. I like that. G.
Or if you have a pocket and you're in the pocket and it's a nice pocket, but you always roll to the left or always roll to the right when there's no pressure. You see phantom pressure, you're like, why don't you just step up and throw the ball?
Yeah. Right, that's what Lamar does.
Yes.
But Watson doesn't do that.
Yeah, no, I think he has a better arm. And I think a lot of these dudes, which is why these guys are getting $250 million, is they throw the ball very well. You got Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Herbert.
Yeah, see, those are clearly passing quarterbacks to me.
But they can run.
I think Deshaun Watson is a hybrid quarterback.
Yeah, I think he's.
I
part
do
of
think
You
that-
think Josh Allen is not?
No,
same?
I think he is a throwing
But
quarterback who can run.
I bet he runs as much, if not more, than Watson does.
because he can.
He's probably got 700 rushing yards.
Yeah.
this year.
Why? What's the
600,
difference
I don't know.
between the two of them?
Because-
Well, the difference is one does it because out of necessity. The other one does it when everything else breaks down.
Right.
He has that tool,
He has that.
so he uses it. You know what I'm
Jo-
saying? Like to your point of
Yeah.
how many design running plays are called for the quarterback.
Yeah.
I think Lamar is probably the only guy that has a package of designed,
Kyler Murray.
delayed runs. Kyler Murray, too.
Kyler
Yeah,
Murray
you're
does
right.
too.
Kyler Murray does too.
Or if you say, I agree with you. Or if you say, you know what? If Josh Allen couldn't run no more today, would he still be elite?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think
would
he'll
Watson.
be.
I don't know that he would.
Absolutely. Now
I don't know.
Well, he was.
Well,
Yeah,
of
he
course
was-
he
he
was.
was that,
yeah.
So was Michael Vick. So was Lamar Jackson.
No, but those guys are not elite throwers. They were elite. Those guys, without their ability to run, would
Vic-
not have been great players.
Vic is Lamar.
Yes,
he was
I agree with
50
you on that.
Deshaun
Vic is
Watson,
totally Lamar.
Deshaun Watson, before all this, and maybe it won't come back, okay, but I don't believe that, but maybe it won't. In his time in Houston, if he wasn't able to run, he would have still been a top 5 quarterback in the league.
I know, and I know it's 6 games
Lamar Jackson
after
would have
2
never-
years off, but I just didn't see that. I didn't see an elite arm talent the last 6 games.
I'm just saying what he was in Houston. I don't know what he's going to be here.
We're trying to project like how can we assume that we're going to get the old Deshaun Watson?
You have to. If you don't, then screw you.
Well, no, they have made that assumption.
Yes.
But now
and I
the
think
next,
there's every
the next,
reason to believe that'll happen.
but there's a progression in that thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, we've made the investment that we think he can. Now we've seen 6 games. Are we still as confident that we think he can? And I'm not. My
Bring
my
him-
level of confidence that he'll return to what he once was has gone down a notch after what I watched.
That's fair.
That's fair.
That's fair.
I will
but
say the
I still wouldn't call him a running quarterback.
Guys, I love this conversation,
Yeah.
but somehow we got on Deshaun Watson, whether he's a running
Oh, yeah.
quarterback. We should be talking defensive coordinator.
True.
Yeah,
And how attractive this
I don't
job
think
is.
he cares.
And
Well,
I do
at least
agree.
it's
We got
Brown's
sidebar.
conversation.
Yes.
It is not. It was a nice sidebar and it was applicable, but I do think we got to get back on track here. We heard from G. Jay, you're the one who hasn't answered this yet. How attractive is this Browns defensive
Yeah,
coordinator?
I'm
job?
somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's the least attractive, but I'm definitely not as optimistic as G. I would not call this the most attractive offer, and it's because of Jason's point. It is a thing that coaches talk about the dysfunction in Cleveland when they are
100%.
interviewing for jobs. I've heard that from coaches that have been
100%.
here on interviews. I've heard that from coaches in the league that are friends with people that have come on interviews, and they've told them and as a cautionary tale, careful if you go there. And that is a thing, and you can deny it if you want, but it
It's
is
a stigma. It's a
100%
stigma.
But guys,
real.
even though that is a thing, I agree. I think a lot of the other teams in there are in a similar boat.
They are, but here's the thing.
Not Cleveland.
Not Cleveland, and here's the thing.
What, Houston right now is not considered as bad as Cleveland or Detroit?
Houston,
Indianapolis with that clown running the team?
Yeah, but
Indy's still better than Cleveland.
Gee, we've seen how quickly fortunes can turn in the NFL when you draft right and when you have the draft capital. Also weighing into this is the fact that they have gaping holes in the defense, and they don't have the capital in the draft at the top of the
Right,
draft.
but all those teams besides Denver have gaping holes on the defense.
I know, but they have draft picks, although Denver does not.
The Browns have plenty
But
of draft picks.
They don't have the capital that everyone wants is the first round.
I wouldn't say they have plenty. They got a 2, a 3, 2 4s, and 2 5s.
Yeah, that's not an
They have 8
abundance of
draft
drafts.
picks.
Yeah, but they have 1, 2. They have no
I
ones.
hear
They have
ya.
1, 2.
I'm going to say they have no draft picks because they don't have two next two ones.
But the 3 may even be a really. Has that been determined if it's
Not
a
yet.
compensatory or because 1-3 goes to Houston, one's compensatory for losing.
And
to
I
the
don't. I
Vikings.
haven't seen that it has been
I
determined
haven't
yet.
either.
How
So
much
if it
cap
has
space do you got?
The Browns have
35 million, they were under, and they can roll that over to next year. But based on all the contracts they have on the roster, they're going to be
There's
an
gonna be some
estimated 51
restructuring.
million over the cap.
No.
There,
I
well, there's
saw it
going to be
today.
some restructuring. They're
They're under the cap with the rollover.
This year.
No, for 23.
Oh, I
looked
haven't
at
seen
it
that.
earlier today.
Yeah.
Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah, with they have 28.
They
to
were
roll
like
over and then 12
last I
over now.
looked, they were like 20 million over, but they were rolling over like I think like 40
No,
million.
but it was officially 12 million over for 23.
Okay.
And now with the rollover,
They have 27 million
28,
to roll
so
over.
Oh, that's how.
they're
that-
16 million under the cap.
Boo, that's
Wow,
how
if
we
that
got.
number stays, that's great.
Well, that's not great, but
No,
it's
but it's
decent.
better than being over,
Yeah.
which where we were projected to be in the first half of the
Yeah.
season.
But that's why.
Plus, there'll be
they
a lot
al-
of restructures.
They were always counting on the rollover.
That's why we got in the quarterback issue. If you want to be successful and win, I'm not going to these other teams start rookies. Indianapolis, no quarterback. Atlanta, no quarterback. Denver, we just said he was washed. You keep looking at these names. There were just no
Houston,
quarterback.
no quarterback.
Houston, no quarterback.
But let me.
They're going to draft one though. G.
They
are
They're
gonna
gonna
draft
draft
but
rookies.
you,
He'll be
But
a
they're going to
rookie.
get the
It's a
second
rookie.
choice.
Here's the Jason. Has this franchise ever hired a head coach with previous head coaching experience?
Yes.
Mangini,
Yep.
It's the only one.
And Hugh Jackson.
Hugh Jackson.
And Hugh Jackson was an interim coach, right? No, he was also head coach for the
Yeah.
Raiders.
Yeah.
And okay, so historically, this franchise
very rarely.
almost never goes out and hires a head coach that's done it before. Twice in its history. I think that the reason I'm concerned about who becomes the DC is this. There's two really good candidates here. Guys that we know that have been head coaches in the league and have had a great deal of success on the defensive side. Flores, not nearly as much as Schwartz. Schwartz is a proven top-tier defensive coordinator. He's going to be able to pick, I think, it'll be Schwartz and Flores that will be able to pick where they go. They're both going to be hot commodities. Because of that, and because of the situation in Cleveland with the dysfunction and the history of rotation of head coaches every 3 or 4 years, and the fact that you're talking about a side of the ball that has major gaping holes. Not a player or two. We're talking about 4 spots that are glaring
But again,
weaknesses
Jay,
and maybe
all
more.
these teams have glaring weaknesses.
But the problem with those is
Yeah.
these two guys that have their choice,
Right.
the best, the ones that we want, they're going to be able to pick. They're not going to be desperate. It's not like, Cleveland is going to get them because they're desperate. That's why it was telling to me that these guys are going to sit back, take their time, do all the interviews, and then make the decision.
But again, what are the jobs in that group that are such great jobs?
I think there are other jobs not yet open that will be more attractive.
Well, that might be the case, yeah. But as of now, there's nothing. There's no
San
other
Francisco. If I'm Schwartz or if I'm Flores,
Right,
I
but-
want to go to San
But
Francisco.
we don't know that D'Amico Ryans is getting a head coaching job.
Jason, he's getting a head coaching job.
How does Jason know?
Yeah,
You don't know.
I mean, we thought that about Eric Bieniemy for
You
years.
never know who's getting a head
and
coaching
he always
job.
got passed over.
And
I'll go on record right
I think
now
he'll
and
be a hot
I will say
candidate.
I will be flat stunned if he is not a head coach in the league next year. I'll be stunned.
And you can use people's dysfunction to your advantage. To be truthful, the Haslams have been very coy and shy about getting rid of defensive coordinator. Joe Woods should have been gone in 2020. He lasted not only last year, he lasted this year. So I mean, it's not like they're blowing
Well, you're not going
guys
to fire
out.
him in his first season.
There's no denying that the Browns ownership is a clown show and that the Browns are amongst 2 or 3 teams probably with the worst reputation in the league. Nobody's denying that. And that's obviously a negative. However, I do think a lot, at least as of now, yeah, of course, if you had a chance to go to San Francisco, you'd rather go to San Francisco. If Lou Anarumo gets a head coaching job off the Bengals, you'd rather go to the I get it. But as of now, I think those other jobs are all kind of crappy too.
Here's one thing that we haven't discussed.
And there's some other bad organizations in there.
Maybe-
And the culture of tough. Jim Irsay hired Jeff Saturday off the freaking street.
No, I know.
He lost every game.
Irsay is becoming Jimmy overnight.
Right, he's a clown.
He's never really interfered before, and this year,
Yeah,
the last
he's
year
out of
or so,
control.
I think he's so aggravated. They lost Andrew Luck, and they're so desperate to find a quarterback. They've tried these retreads. I think he's just out of his mind right
Yeah.
now. But I want to get back. Maybe you guys talked about this when I wasn't in. Jim Schwartz runs a 4-3. Brian Flores runs a 3-4. You talked about that?
We did talk about that.
I think that's overrated.
Well, here's one thing, just real quick. I want
Yeah.
to make the point. I was talking to one Browns player who felt like 3-4 is where it's at right now, and a lot of
and
the
if you're
top
going to make a
defenses-
change, now's the time to do it.
Well, that's exactly it. But
Schwartz also plays a more conservative style of defense.
But here's 2 things on this, real quick.
Yeah.
I did talk to a player who felt like 3-4 is where it's at. He looked at the Steelers and said they've been running 3-4 for 25 years. Look at longer than that. Look at the success that they've had with it. Then I talked to Anthony Walker, who's like, man, it don't matter. Everybody's a nickel
matter.
anyway. Everybody's
Yeah.
running nickel now anyway. So,
Yeah.
Well,
but,
on the back end you are, but it matters a little bit up front.
but here's the one thing where we keep talking about they're going to have to remake their front 7. Maybe that's attractive to a
That's true.
DC who says, I can maybe have a voice. I like this guy. We can get this guy.
right. They
Yeah.
got to remake the whole defense.
They have to
anyway.
remake the front
You're
7
going to have
anyway.
JOK and Myles Garrett. Anybody else is
Everybody
whatever.
here okay with a switch to a 3-4?
Yeah, I think nowadays
I would
it doesn't
co-sign
matter.
that
I
in a
would.
heartbeat.
I wouldn't
I don't think it
second.
matters.
In a heartbeat.
I think it's so
Because
everything's so
what?
hybrid
They've
nowadays.
been playing a 4-3 now with really a 2-3.
Yeah.
Because they've got 2 players up front and then 2 guys.
Yeah, they need. I don't care. For me, it's pressure. I don't care if it's you bringing it out a 3-4, a bare front, goal line. Is how aggressive are you, and how often?
That's why you'd like to see Flores.
Yes, I don't. Jim Schwartz is a good coordinator, right? He's more of less rush forward, get home. Well, we don't got that right now. You got one, and you know what that means. You can't be sitting back in zone with 3 other guys that don't got the same skill set. I need somebody to manufacture something.
In defense of Schwartz, his defense, like if you look at the analytics, there's that scary word again. If you look at the DVO defensive rankings for his defenses the last 5 years, top 6 or 8 every single year between his time in Philly and his time in Tennessee as a defensive assistant.
I don't want to fall into the trap of if it's not Schwartz or it's not Flores, this is a bad hire.
I know. We don't know.
No,
I mean,
never
go back
know.
to your guy in Cincinnati. Whoever would have thought
When the
that he was
Bengals,
this good.
I remember when the Bengals hired Lou Anarumo. I was like, "Who the hell is this guy? I'd never heard of him before." I'm like, "This guy's a terrible hire by the Bengals." He's probably one of the 5 best DCs in the league.
Every great coach in the NFL at one point was a no-name.
That's
pretty
Every
much.
single one of them.
Unless he was a good player, which
mean-
doesn't happen often.
Well, who's the great coach right now that was a great player in the NFL?
Vrabel.
I will say this:
That might be it.
It's a short list.
I think it is.
the Browns. This is
McVay
different.
was player of the year in
The
Georgia.
Browns are they are here at ground zero again.
Yeah.
You have to get the number 1 candidate. I can't have you going 3 or 4.
But our number 1 candidate may not be their number 1
And
candidate.
may not actually be the best candidate,
Right.
just because
Right.
we think it is.
But
You know what I mean?
but I do need somebody. I want somebody with experience.
Jay, who's making the hire?
I think Kevin.
on his own.
Yeah. I mean,
in a
he's going to have
vacuum?
input from 77 people because that's how it works. But I think ultimately it's his call.
So you do think that
I think it's his call.
Because I think if the head coach isn't picking the coordinators and
Yeah,
the
it's a big
assistants, it's a
problem.
real problem.
And what's interesting in this instance is everybody relies on their relationships.
Sure.
Right? And the fact that he was in Minnesota and only Minnesota for so long, I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just interesting because most people bounce around.
Yeah.
And most people move around and they have trees or whatever you
you're
want
right.
to call it from a bunch of different
the only
spots.
contacts he's had were guys that came through Minnesota at
Well,
one point.
Yeah.
Well, by
and
the way-
when I was in the NBA, you could always go back and look at where a guy went, where he was, and normally whoever he's going to get is a guy he's had relationships with in the past. And I don't know if that's going to be the case this time. I think it could be two blind guys working together, for lack of a better
The
term.
only guy we've heard mentioned that has a relationship with Kevin Stefanski is the guy none of us have ever heard of, and that's this guy Sean Desai from Seattle.
Yeah.
Now,
And that may wind up being the
my
guy because
concern
of that.
about him, and this may be unfair, and you know me, I have been the defender of analytics when everybody else is scared of the word. But Sean Desai is another one of these nerdy analytics guys, and I just feel like we've got enough nerdy analytics guys. We need one guy that's just like, F it, let's go kill the other team.
I will say this: it's been fun to watch Bulls' transformation this year from being, I think, more in on analytics to now.
No,
at
I'm
least
still
being,
in, but I've
no,
always
you're
felt
in. But you really, the last half of the season, have been making arguments for, come on, guys, there's got to be something else other than
But, Jay,
numbers, and I've always said that.
But I have always been for you got to have both. I've just argued a
But
lot.
you've killed those
You and I have argued about analytics. So in those arguments, I'm going to defend the analytics side because you
I'm
may
trying-
have been poo-pooing analytics.
Yeah, no, what I'm trying to say is what I think you've really come around to, thankfully, and I think we've found common ground. I've always believed that it has to be a blend. And I think, and I had said early this season when the scoring was down and we had talked about why, and why have the defenses caught up, and why are some of these premier quarterbacks struggling so much? It was a trend we saw most of the season. And when I would talk to NFL people about that, the thing that I heard over and over again was, I think maybe the pendulum is swinging back now from relying more on analytics. It's now coming back to the middle, which I think where it should have been all along. Analytics absolutely will always have a place in all of sports. But when it's driving the bus and there's not a spot in that room for gut and feel and instinct and flow of the game and sometimes hunch, I think, and that's where we were in a dangerous spot. But I do think we've come back the other way. Jay, you agree with that?
I think we're getting there. I don't know. This is so new. And, again, I lived it in the NBA where the Rockets were the first team. If it wasn't a three or layup, it's a bad shot.
Yeah.
And they took it to the extreme.
They really
And
did.
now you see mid-range players coming back. DeMar DeRozan is a mid-range guy. There's mid-range players now who weren't allowed to play in the league, when the analytics rage
Biggs
was going
got washed
on.
out because of analytics.
Biggs did get washed out. And now they're coming back.
They are.
But they're back in a way where they can dribble, pass, and shoot. And you got 7-footers doing things in the game now that they never could
did.
do before.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to watch the transformation. And maybe we'll see something like that
Right.
in the NFL. I don't know. I think it's still
I feel like it's underway.
analytics in the NFL is behind analytics in baseball and basketball. Can we agree?
I
it
would
was
100%.
last-
I think baseball leads the way.
it does, and it was first. Baseball was
It was.
first, and then basketball, and then the NFL. So I think all of them have gone through sort of this, and we still see baseball evolving, where maybe launch angle is not going to be as prevalent as it was.
But getting back, sorry to cut you off, Jason.
You're
because
good. I was out of things to say.
I do want to get back to your point. I think you made a great point there before when you said, let's not do this where if they end up not getting Flores, that we all go bananas.
Yeah, no, that is.
Because the reality of the situation is, even though we've all said we want Flores, and he seems like the right choice, and we hope we can get him, the bottom line is, even the Browns, and let's pretend the Browns were a good organization, all right? Let's say it was the Steelers or whatever.
I'll play your silly
When
game.
you hire a coordinator, right, you don't know, you never know when you hire
No,
a
you
coach.
don't.
You don't know for sure
You know
he's the
when
right
we'll
guy.
know? Next year at this time.
That's right.
And you don't know how
Give me a year.
You don't know if the personalities are going to mesh.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
and
That's why
that's the
Desai
part
might
you never know.
That's why Desai might be the fit personality-wise.
Right.
Right.
But we talked at length yesterday on the show, and I wish you'd been here, but I'll ask you about it right now. One of the things we talked about as to why we like, particularly me, and I think we all said this, Brian Flores, was because he's that alpha. He's an alpha
Yes.
guy.
He's an ass
And
kicker.
this franchise, when you look at their best players, their 6 best players, none of them are alphas. None of them.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't exist in the coaching staff. It doesn't exist on the roster. We thought that Flores would be the perfect yin-yang, the perfect bad cop to the good cop. And if Sean Desai is a similar personality type of Stefanski and another Ivy Leaguer thinker, we might be watching next year going, again, there's no spark.
Yeah.
And that's why I think
it feels like Flores is the home run
right
hire.
personality fit.
That's who I want. That's
Yeah.
who I'm on record. I want
Now,
Flores
by the
too.
way-
All right, so it has been said, so it shall be done.
By the way, Gerard Mayo might be that same type of guy.
He could be. I don't really
just
know
doesn't
much
have
about
as
his
much
coaching
experience.
style. I don't think you can have that coaching style when you're coaching under Bill. I don't.
Yeah.
Because he's
But
such
Flores
a
did,
clear
didn't he?
alpha. Yeah, but he didn't have that attitude when he was under Bill. Like, I just think
that we knew of.
not that we ever saw.
The Brady personality came out after he left New England.
Yeah, right.
I think you're
The
right.
Flores personality came out after
All right,
he
Mike,
left
what
New
do you
England.
got for us here?